On behalf of the Liberal Group, Mr. Verhofstadt.
Thank you very much, President, and dear colleagues. Let me start by remembering what the French President has said a few days ago. It was in Japan. He said and he declared in Japan that the euro crisis was over. Well, Chairman, you have to know I really like the French President. I like his style, and I hope that, he was right. But this time I think that we have to contradict him. Non, Monsieur Hollande, la crise n'est pas derrière nous.
No, Mr. Hollande,
this crisis is not over. I think that we have to tell the truth to our citizens. We are not at the end of a crisis. We are in the middle of it. In the middle of what is more and more, I can compare it, I think, with what happened exactly in Japan, because he did this wording in Japan. Well, what is happening is a long period of stagnation, were we in it for the moment. And you can compare it with the Japanese and what have faced the Japanese in the 90s. More than 13 years long, they tried to kickstart their economy with more austerity, then again with more solidarity, then with both of them, and it didn't work, it didn't help. And the reason was simple. The reason was that they couldn't solve their banking crisis. It's only after a recapitalization in the Japanese financial institutions of more than $500 billion that there was again a kickstart of the Japanese economy. And that is exactly what is happening now. Because I hear also all the proposals about youth unemployment, and I hear all the proposals about giving cheap loans to the SMEs, but the real problem is not there. We cannot recover if we don't restore, first of all, the transmission mechanism between the banks and the real economy that is blocked today, that is blocked in the real world of today. SMEs will have to pay 8, 9, 10% on their loans, on their investments. That's impossible to gain that. You have to do a criminal activity, I think, to have 8 or 9 or 10% of return. And the only way to restore this transmission mechanism, Mr. Barroso, is to have the banking union. That is the priority of the priorities. And if we could do something maybe in this council, because that's the only thing what I can see, the progress we can make beyond youth employment and beyond and above more symbolic things, is an agreement on this banking union. Yeah, but you have already made 3 times an agreement on the banking union inside the council. And what is happening? We don't have an agreement on the single supervisory mechanism because we have an outstanding discussion with the European Central Bank on the fact that we as European Parliament are asking accountability from the ECB on this supervisory task. What is normal? And the resolution fund, well, we are still waiting. Mr. Barroso, you announced it in a few weeks, a proposal on the resolution mechanism, but a stillborn proposal because it's already shut down by some of the member states. By Merkel and Hollande, we're coming together and we're in fact wanting a patchwork of national resolution authorities. We have been there before. That's exactly the same mistake that we have made 3 years ago. You remember that, when we have talked about the financial supervision. And we have said, with the Parliament, we need one single European supervisor, and not a coordination of national supervisors. 3 years ago they didn't accept it, and after the Spanish crisis, what happened? They have to accept a European single supervisor. Well, exactly the same mistake is happening now with the resolution fund. They say already no against your proposal. That is not stillborn, that is I should say, is discussed for the moment in the College of the European Commission. They say no to it, and they know very well that their proposal cannot work, and we shall again lose 3 years with the discussion about, no, it has to be national coordination, national authorities who are doing it, a patchwork of these national authorities. Well, I think that if you can do something with the Irish presidency, that is to make things clear on the 27th of June and to stop this fighting from member states asking for national solutions where everybody knows that only a European solution can solve this problem. And Chairman, it is not only the only standstill we see for the moment in Europe. Mr. Svoboda has spoken about it, MFF. Yeah, there is no progress. Council is simply not listening to the request of the Parliament. And it's not only, Mr. Barroso, about flexibility. Sorry, flexibility is important. There is also the question of own resources. There is also the question of the revision clause. It's not thinkable. We cannot accept that the next Parliament, elected in 2014, shall have no say on the budget for a period of 7 years. It's like Mr. Hollande coming in power in France and he has to accept the 7-year budget of Mr. Sarkozy. That should work, maybe. Huh? Such a way of thinking. That's exactly what you are saying to us for the moment. That you don't want a real revision clause. The same is happening with the Economic and Monetary Union. Together with Mr. Gualtieri and Mr. Brok, I'm Sherpa for the Economic and Monetary Union. We went to the Sherpa meeting. You know what the conclusion of the Sherpa meeting was? Everything postponed until the end of the year. That was the conclusion of the meeting. And the same is happening with the European Central Bank, which for the moment is struggling before the Constitutional Court. I think that Mr. Schäuble is still... Yes, I'm concluding, Mr. President. I think Mr. Schäuble has totally right. It is not the ECB who is in fact overstepping its mandate. It's the court which is overstepping its mandate for the moment in Germany. And so my conclusion is this crisis is not over. We need a firm wake-up call, President, in your Council on the 27th of June. And we need also a wake-up call to the Commission. The Commission comes now forward with the package on your blueprint, doesn't wait longer for conclusions of the Council, which shall never come. Thank you.
Kollege Verhofstadt, Sie haben zu Ihrer Zeit über 1 Minute überzogen, aber jetzt bekommen Sie auch noch eine zusätzliche Frage von Frau Thyssen.
And in addition
Ich bin ziemlich sicher, Sie wollen die...
Mrs. Thyssen wants to ask you a question. I'm sure that you'd be delighted to answer, Mrs. Thyssen. Thank you, President. Mr. Verhofstadt, I fully share your concerns about the need to complete a banking union. The first thing we have to do, however, is to ensure that we have a European supervisory mechanism. We don't yet, however, the interinstitutional agreement with the central bank, which is essential to achieve that. And I'm sure we can count on the support of your group to do that. The second barrier, however, is the fact that the German Parliament, according to the German Constitution, must give Mr. Schäuble the go-ahead before he can pave the way to consensus in ECOFIN. We're talking here about a file which requires consensus in ECOFIN. So, Mr. Verhofstadt, I'd like to ask you here and now whether you are willing to call on your German liberal colleagues in the German Parliament to ensure that they can try to bring this file forward by 2 or 3 days in July. That will enable us to complete these discussions, which will give us just 2 months to ensure that the banking union legislation can come into force. President, I'll answer in Dutch. I don't think that the FDP party in Germany is the only barrier to moving towards a European single supervisory mechanism. Clearly, I've always been a real advocate of this, although there are other issues where I don't agree with Mrs. Thyssen so much. However, the situation you've just described, the fact that all progress is being blocked because one country is constitutionally bound to give the green light, actually shows up another problem, a problem which isn't linked to the German government or the German coalition. The problem it really shows up is the fact that it's no longer possible to govern Europe using an intergovernmental approach, an approach which requires the green light from 17 finance ministers or 17 prime ministers. It's simply not possible. This also proves that what we need now above all, and as quickly as possible, is a banking union. And we need a banking union as called for by the Commission. That's to say, we need a banking union under the scrutiny of the European Commission, not 17 finance ministers. For the time being, if there's a problem with the banks, we require unanimity in ECOFIN before a decision be taken. And once again, the German Constitution prevents anything happening. Thank you.